2015, an elite DFS Army Commando unit formed to bring high-level DFS strategy to the masses. Today, hated by DFS sharks and lineup sellers alike, they continue their quest to turn dope into DFS pros.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the opening week of the NFL DFS podcast brought to you by the one, the only DFS Army, and also Game Breakdown hosted by me, Chapadong. As you've known me inside the DFS Army, you can find me out on Twitter under the same name, and I'm a coach and contributor inside the Army and known as a bit of a chalk eater. I kind of master the obvious. And my niche seems to be taking the newer DFS players and members and coaching them up on the fundamentals of player selection, contest selection, bankroll management, those types of fundamentals. Joining me again this year is the founder and five-star general of the DFS Army, the Fantasy Football Geek. You can follow him out on Twitter and in DFS Army under the same name as well. And as leader of the DFS Army and as a top-ranked NFL and MMA DFS player per Roto Grinders, Fantasy Football Geek is set to walk you through this exciting week one of games for the NFL season. Head over to dfsarmy.com now and click on the NFL tab to find a written interactive article designed to follow along with the podcast. Just open the article, scroll down a little bit through those graphics that are actually from a new and exciting feature we're bringing to the table, a VIP exclusive page called the NFL Data Station, where we house all of our stats, tools, player picks, and even the industry's most powerful algorithm and optimizer, the Domination Station. At dfsarmy.com, you will also find several timeless strategic articles that our members have credited for forever changing the way they have learned how to play the game. Head over there now. Follow along game-by-game discussion right along with us as Geek hits the high points of game flow, trends, analysis, relevant statistics from both a cash game and a GPP perspective. And again, for details on the DFS Army and its VIP membership, scroll down to the bottom of this article and follow the link. So let's get rolling into week one. Kevin, I bet you've had a few things that you probably want to say to our listeners as well. But first of all, how excited are you? It's here, man. NFL is ready to go.
Absolutely. What's up, everybody? Couldn't be more excited. Week one is finally here. It feels like it's been forever since we've done any kind of NFL DFS. I'm not much of a preseason guy, so this really gets the juices flowing. Looking at the stats, and I'm super excited, obviously, about all the awesome stuff we're doing over at DFS Army with tons and tons of new content, more pros writing for us, more coaches in our Slack group, so it's going to be pretty awesome. And I'm excited to get going with this. I've already started crafting some lineups and really getting a sense of what this week is going to be like. And one quick note of caution, obviously, before we get into these games is week one, part of what we do here on this podcast is we really like to look at the Vegas lines and kind of make assumptions based off of them. This season we're going to take it a little further in general by kind of figuring out that everybody's looking at these lines and then trying to be a little bit, more strategic about what we're doing. But one thing just to note is week one is notoriously difficult to predict. Some teams come out, they're just rusty. They're not quite up to form yet. A lot of players have had a lot of stats. So if there was ever a week to kind of not super believe in the Vegas totals, the numbers, the over-unders, this is it. So I'm going to touch on that with each game breakdown as we go through them. Just kind of little notes that I might maybe differ from what the odds makers say in certain places, just because, again, some of these teams are just going to come out rusty. There are some quarterbacks that haven't played a lot, and it happens every year week one. It just takes a couple of games to get up to form, and so you do notice some weird outcomes in the first week of the season.
Awesome. Well, I guess without further ado, you want to dive in and get rocking?
Yeah, let's do this.
Awesome. See, this is nice because last year sometimes we didn't quite get to that Thursday game. Today we get to talk about the Thursday game as well, which is one of my favorite games on the entire slate anyway. We've got Kansas City going into Foxborough to visit the New England Patriots. And the New England Patriots are 7.5-point favorites. We've got a 48.5-point total on the game, which is, kind of okay. And, like we were talking about a little bit before we actually turned the recorder on, this suggests, obviously, looking on paper. So I'm interested in your take that New England should turn it over to running backs at some point where, with the big spread, and we don't really trust Belichick's running backs anyway, and KC should be forced to kind of air it out at some point. But we know that Alex Smith has kind of got a phobia about throwing it deep. He ranks 26th in the league at air yards, which is, yards the ball traveled in the air. What do you make of this game? What could you tell anybody? Because is this one where you're talking about a slower start? Was this kind of what was in your mind?
Could be all of them, but I mean, certainly we've seen Tom Brady, any one of them. We've seen Tom Brady start slow in different years, where the first couple games he's just not putting up all those points. Remember, these guys aren't playing a ton. They don't play a ton in the preseason. But all that said, really what we're looking at here, and in this particular game, you have the Patriots at home. Kansas City, while they have a defense that definitely got a lot of turnovers and they're a scoring type of defense, you're not doing that to the Patriots. Their DVP numbers for last season, nothing special, middle of the road. I mean, decent against the QB. They're 12, and but middle of the road RB, WR1 numbers. So you really have to kind of look at the Patriots as all systems go this week. They're at home. They have a 28-point total. So you got 4 touchdowns to go around. Obviously, Edelman is out. So we have our new guy, Brandon Cooks, in there. Gronk and Chris Hogan. Those are our 3 pass catchers of interest in this game. Any one of them can really be paired up with Tom Brady here in your DFS lineups. I think you get probably the most uniqueness pairing him up with someone like Hogan. We've seen Hogan put up big numbers in the past, so he can do that. But he's not a possession guy, so if he's not catching touchdowns, he might not do a whole lot. And then you have Gronk, who it's tough to spend up ever at tight end, but Gronk is always kind of a contrarian spend-up situation. And to touch on what you said before, on the Patriots side, I don't think you can trust the running back situation at all. At all.
Ever.
I mean,
almost ever.
Certainly not until there's some clarity, and we don't have any of that. Is it Gillislee? Is it Rex Burkhead? Are they just going to go kind of heavy with Deion Lewis, James White? We don't know. And if somebody, we don't know if it's Gillislee or Rex Burkhead. Everybody's trying to find who's in the Garrett Blount role for that team, but we don't know. We don't know yet. Belichick's not going to tell us. So unless somebody's inactive for this game, I think you have to stay away from that. And of course, remember, this is a Thursday game, so we don't want to. This is not a slate I'm going to play. I normally don't play a ton of Thursday through Monday anyway, but you might want to get in this slate just because it looks like a different game is going to be moved to a different day, that Miami game, because of the hurricane. And so we might end up actually getting 2 early games to kind of choose from in this particular slate. And I do like the Monday night game for some different reasons. On the Kansas City side, this offense, obviously Kareem Hunt was propelled into the starting role, and he's going to get all the touches he can handle. They're going to throw it to him, I think. Now, it's tricky trusting a rookie running back in week 1, and he's not supremely cheap on any of the sites, unfortunately. DraftKings kind of, I don't know, they must have anticipated that Hunt was going to be something because, they jacked up his price pretty good, and even on FanDuel, he's at 6,400, so a bargain price, but not a giveaway number.
Bear in mind that slate wasn't released as early as the main slate was. I think those injuries happened before those prices came out. So I think that gave the sites time to adjust.
Darn. If that's the case, then darn. Yeah, I don't recall, but
because that totally sucked. Because I remember looking back at some of the early games posting, it was just like, oh man, these guys are going to be Kareem Hunt. It's going to be great. It's going to be dirt cheap. He's going to be the ultra chalk. And I was like, crap, that Thursday game's not on the main anymore.
No, yeah.
So there it wasn't posted.
That's why he wasn't. Yeah, because he's really priced appropriately on DraftKings for sure, and I think a little under I think he's a bit of a bargain on FanDuel at 6,400. But these are, in the end of the day, what you have here are two good teams. They're going to play each other tough. Kansas City's going to hang in there. New England is probably the best team in the league, so they're rightfully favored. It looks here by 7.5, and Tyreek Hill for Kansas City is in play, and Travis Kelce. New England's not great against the tight end position. I think they'll game plan actually for Kelce, so I'm not super confident in him here, because if Belichick's going to take somebody out, it'll probably either be him or they'll take out the run. They always game plan for something. They always take away one weapon and kind of that's what they do. So we'll see here, but I definitely like Tom Brady in cash. I think he's potentially the highest ranked quarterback on this slate, and then pairing him up with a Hogan. If Hogan was cheap enough, that's probably something I'd look at. Yeah, Hogan's relatively reasonable on DraftKings at 4,800, and on FanDuel, also a reasonable 6,000. So I don't think he's going to be high owned, and that's kind of probably one way I'm looking for this particular one. And I don't really want to spend up for some of these other guys. I'd also obviously be considering Brandon Cooks.
What about New England's defense?
I don't think this is a good situation to play New England defense. Kansas City just doesn't turn the ball over. So
right.
To choose a defense, yes, I see the spread and it's high, and that's one of our criterion. But I think the other criteria are you want an opposing team that turns the ball over. Kansas City is literally built not to turn the ball. Everything they do is about ball control, possession. Even when they go behind, the problem with Kansas City and why that rule doesn't necessarily work with them is even when they go behind, they don't just start airing it out. They continue to run it. Andy Reid's kind of weird like that in the way that he calls games. Like his team will be behind. They'll still be running it. And you're like, dude, what are you doing? Like, they're not airing it out. And that's why Alex Smith has that bad deep ball rating, but it doesn't lead to teams, opposing defenses scoring big against them. So, no, I would not use Patriots defense here.
Safe to call them a trap?
I don't even think it's a trap. I don't think it's attractive to use them. If somebody is, more power, but that's not where I would go.
Fair enough to me. You ready to move to the next game?
Move to the next one.
All
Let's
right.
do it.
This is your new New York Jets heading into Buffalo. And again, now this is one I would ask you since we were just talking about defenses. We've got a 42.5 point total, which is pretty low. We've got a 6.5 point spread in favor of the home team, Buffalo. We know the rule last year or two was just take the defense playing the Jets and just roll them out in cash. Is that something that this scenario stacks up better than the New England scenario does, and something you would consider Buffalo in cash for defense?
Oh, yeah. Oh, big time. I mean, so the difference here is I believe, at least on FanDuel, where Buffalo isn't, I think there's one of the sites where, like on DraftKings, Buffalo's the most expensive defense this week, and I do think people will pay out for them, but I think that price will have people looking elsewhere. On FanDuel, Buffalo's fairly reasonably priced compared to some others. It's not the most expensive, so I do think they'll be rather chalky on FanDuel defensively.
Sure.
There's more, again, to choosing a defense than just the spread. Obviously, Buffalo's favored here, but this is one of those games where I'm a little bit not so sure. The Bills kind of seem like, and we can't be sure, but they kind of seem like they're almost tanking the season early. Like, they don't look like a team that wants to win. They've gotten rid of a lot of their top players. They seem to be selling off pieces. Sammy Watkins, and they just got rid of Jonathan Williams, which was an oddball move, the backup running back. So they've lost a lot of pieces on defense. So I'm a little bit concerned here that this may be a bit of a trap. Now, all that said, I mean, the Jets are so terrible. It makes sense to target defenses against them. It just does, because the Jets are awful. But they're going to be the worst offense in the league. They don't have much to bring to the table. So, yeah, I totally see this being the chalk defense of this week. It's going to be hard to find another one chalkier. So I think in cash games, it's kind of like a free square almost situation where you can take them and assume, I think Aaron was talking about this in his defense article, but you can take them and assume that other people in your cash opponents are using them too, and even if they kind of tank, it doesn't
Right.
hurt you that much because your opponent's probably using them also. And I like free
Right,
squares
absolutely.
like that. Yeah, I mean, it kind of opens things up. But there are some sneaky thoughts I have about Buffalo running an inefficient offense as well, and therefore not maybe taking this big lead or forcing the Jets to kind of play from behind. There is a couple scenarios I can envision where this game actually plays out pretty close defensively. On skill positions for both teams, I mean, for Buffalo, you'd love to target wide receivers against the Jets because they're really bad against wide receivers. But, I mean, Buffalo doesn't really have a lot of... This is the problem with that team. They don't really have a lot of talent at wide receiver at this point. The only real player that maybe kind of sort of stands out is Jordan Matthews, and he's kind of been injured for a bit. Obviously, LaShawn McCoy is the man, and he doesn't seem to have a backup, so I'm sure he'll get a ton of touches. They'll probably just run him to the ground this year. I assume that's just what they want to do. So he'll get a lot of touches, and McCoy's a good play here at home, heavily favored. On the Jet side, there is actually a couple of plays that I like.
Good. I want to hear this.
Yeah, so in my contrarian sort of GPP mindset, again, we just talked about how chalky the Buffalo defense is going to be. Well, one of the things that you almost automatically do in lineup construction is you don't want to take offensive players playing against your defense. So most people are just going to just shut out the Jets completely, Jets offense.
Right.
But the Jets have a player named Robbie Anderson, who is in essence their number one wide receiver. They have an actual quarterback. He's not great, but he's an actual quarterback in Josh McCown who can deliver a pass to a wide receiver. Robbie Anderson is $3,800 on DraftKings, super cheap, and in a PPR situation, if we assume that this game will be a Jets from behind kind of throwing it a lot, playing catch, why shouldn't Robbie Anderson pay off on $3,800? He doesn't need to do much, so he won't be high owned. He's a super punt that will allow you to pay up for David Johnson. Everybody wants to pay up for David Johnson or one of these guys, and this is one of those spots where that can open up for you. So I do like him, and obviously I don't hate Bilal Powell here. Similar reasoning. Bilal Powell comes in the Jets 2-minute drill, which they could be in the entire. Assuming that you think this will be this blowout, they could be in the 2-minute drill like the whole fourth quarter, like a big chunk of this game. He's used in the passing game, the check down passes. So a guy like Bilal Powell, even without a touchdown, particularly on DraftKings with the full point PPR, might wind up with 6 or 7 receptions. He could have a touchdown. He could have a good game here. And I don't think anyone... or you're going to get such lower ownership because obviously everybody likes Buffalo defense and they're going to be heavily owned. So it will remove people from playing players against them. So there are a couple spots I actually like in that game, as surprising as that may seem.
Yeah, but when you explain it like that, it's not the craziest thing ever. It actually is one of those contrarian spots that makes sense. So
yeah, I'm legitimately actually finding Robbie Anderson in some of my cash lineups early, which I'm not guaranteeing that will stay. Yeah, I like a punt like that. I'm not guaranteeing that'll. In cash, I like to find a punt that I think has a very reasonable floor, and then I could pay up for those studs that I think have those much higher floors. So yeah, I'm even using it out in DraftKings some Robbie Anderson. In
that's
cash.
Stuff in the Army we talk about all the time. As far as lineup construction techniques and stuff, which really has helped me a lot through the past couple of years as well. If we move on to Atlanta and Chicago, now we're running into a little bit higher scoring game. You've got a 50-point total, 50.5 points. You've got that big spread though again, but this time by the road team. Atlanta's heading into Soldier Field, but Atlanta's carrying the 7-point favorite here. Is this all systems go for these high-flying Falcons, or is this a spot where you might focus a little bit more on like a Devonta Freeman or somebody who is kind of game script independent in this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think Matt Ryan is one of the top plays on the board this week at quarterback. The only thing that can really slow this down, again, we're looking at last year's numbers defensively, so you never quite know. But, I mean, Chicago versus opposing WR1, 27th, opposing tight end, 28th. You could pass on them. And, oh, by the way, you can also run on them. They were 19th against the running back position last season. So there's a lot of ways for Atlanta to be scoring here. The only holdback, again, is again, it's week 1, and we don't know if Matt Ryan and Julio Jones are up to speed, or if they're a little rusty. I would assume they are. That's a team that's been healthy all offseason. There really hasn't been a lot of missed snaps or anything like that for the preseason or for training camp for these guys. So they've been healthy. There's no reason why Atlanta is going to be Super Bowl losing teams. Often it's really a pattern where losing Super Bowl teams kind of slump it the next season a little bit. So that is definitely a concern. But you can't beat a 28. The game total, the projected points for Atlanta, 28 and 3/4, is higher than the projection for the Patriots. And it's 4.25 touchdowns. So they're going to go to someone. Probably going to go 1 to Freeman. Probably going to go a 1 or 2 to Julio Jones. And maybe you'll see some of the other characters get in on the action as well. But I really like Matt Ryan here in this one for the Falcons, and I like pairing him up with Julio or Freeman or both. On the flip side,
or both. Nice.
Yeah, sure, and GPPs. On the flip side for Chicago, they don't have a lot of weapons. They lost Cam Meredith. Kevin White cannot be trusted. We don't know what the hell his deal is. I don't know who their actual tight end that they're going to throw to is. I don't think it's Zach Miller. So it's just Jordan Howard or bust with this team. I mean, the one thing that we could say positive for Jordan Howard is, Atlanta hasn't been very good against the run. But I'm a little worried about game script as far as Howard goes. But the thing is, they don't have an alternative, really. There's no one else in there that they're going to bring in. So Howard looks pretty good here in this one. He's at home. I don't love running backs on teams that are underdogs, but at least he's at home, so that is a check box that kind of negates the negatives. And he's facing, again, an Atlanta team that is not great defensively, period, and certainly not great against the running back, or wasn't last year. And again, one of the challenges in the first game of the season is we don't know. Maybe they're better at certain areas this year. We'll see, but on paper, this is a good spot for Jordan Howard. And I don't think he's going to be high owned either. I think Howard is actually going to go very low owned. Again, for much of the same reasons I talked about on the Jets. You're just looking at Chicago as a team that's going to get crushed. Howard is not the cheapest of guys on either of the sites. He's at 7,500, so he's in a really tricky range on FanDuel. Not like a really good spot. You're going to look at some other names. You just will when you get to that mid sevens. I mean, Jay Ajayi is there. You've got Todd Gurley, who's probably in a better spot, a little cheaper, and Carlos Hyde, even cheaper, and in an even better spot, Dalvin Cook. So I think there are other options that really look better on paper this week. So I think Howard for me is more of a GPP low ownership scenario than anything else. And I really don't. I guess you can roll the dice with like a Kendall Wright as a similar situation to Robbie Anderson, where they're gonna have to probably throw. They're gonna be behind. They're probably gonna have to start throwing, and you can't really trust Kevin White. And it seems like Kendall Wright is the other guy for that team. So maybe he busts out with a nice kind of out of the slot for these guys. So a couple of more sneaky plays, I would say, than plays you really want to get crazy with. On this one.
I like your take on the Zach Miller maybe not being the tight end there. That's kind of nice because we know from last year he was a name that we could recognize coming out of Chicago. Moving to the next game, with Jacksonville going into Houston, this is, to me, I don't know really what to make. This game has a lot of buzz and a lot of, not really chalk buzz, but just a lot of white noise, if you will, with Jacksonville and Fournette and, Houston and their defense. And of course, rallying around Hurricane and all this kind of stuff. They've got a 42-point total, which kind of just makes me go yuck. And Houston, however, is at home with the 4-point spread in their favor, which makes me think defense. And I know that with the whole Henny, Bortles, whoever the hell their quarterback is, disaster going on down there. I mean, good Lord, that seems like a pretty good spot for another defense. is there anything else, or is this game kind of just a fade to you, or where are you looking at here?
No, we never say a fade. Listen, I look at the Jacksonville team and I would say that's a fade. Outside of the most wacky GPP sort of like Jacksonville defense, mainly because Houston is not playing a quality. They don't have a quality quarterback. Whenever that's the case, you can always think about the opposing defense. But I'm not going to think very hard on that because I don't see Jacksonville really. I don't see the Jags really doing a lot of scoring here, and so they're not going to put pressure on the Texans in such a way that would cause the Texans to present scoring opportunities for the Jaguars defense normally. So there's really not a lot to like here. Houston's defense is very good. They're underrated and from last year, and I think they're going to get better this year. So last season, they just opposing quarterbacks did shit against them. Opposing running backs, 11. They were number 3, ranked top 3 for limiting opposing quarterback points. WR1 and RB1, they were fine, top 10, that kind of thing. So they were very solid on defense. We know Houston's going to be better at home. We know Houston has a lot of emotion with what's going on over there, with the hurricane and all of that. They're going to come out strong. They're going to want to deliver. I believe in this stuff. They're going to want to deliver for the fans. They're going to give them an escape from all the misery that's going on down there. So I really think Houston's going to come out fired up. This is the perfect matchup for their defense. Jacksonville, Blake Bortles, barely hanging on to the quarterback position over there. They don't, they have a rookie running back. Those guys fumble. They're nervous in their first game. You have DeAndre Hopkins. He's very good, and Hopkins could potentially get his in this game, but that's not going to make a big. He's not going to go nuts. This team limits opposing offense, so I think the best bet here is ignore Jacksonville. As much as I hate ignoring any team, we ignore Jacksonville. And with the Texans, did I say DeAndre Hopkins? I meant Allen Robinson. But with the Texans,
okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But with the Texans, a guy who's going to go super overlooked. Again, this is more of GPP. Jacksonville's defense is improving. They're not bad. The buzz is they're going to be a little better. They were able to limit wide receivers and quarterbacks last season pretty well. I think they're going to be a little better this year. But the problem is when your offense is inefficient, your defense just gives up late. So I kind of like Lamar Miller. I don't know how much I'm going to own him, but I think Lamar Miller is definitely a playable guy. Like in season long, I'm definitely, I'm not benching him. I'm definitely going to play him. Anytime the defense is in play, the running back is in play as well. So I definitely, I don't mind Lamar Miller here for Houston. I'm probably not going to go nuts with too crazy on DeAndre Hopkins. That's why I said Allen Robinson before. Not going to go too crazy.
Well, they're kind of both in the same spot to me. I mean, they're both kind of wait and see for a week or two.
Well, you wouldn't mind. You want to see if Savage is better than what Brock Osweiler brought to the table last year. I think it's almost impossible that he's not. And I think actually DeAndre Hopkins will probably be underpriced and underrated a little bit for the first few weeks of the season. There's nobody else to throw to on the Houston offense. So, I mean, I think it's Braxton Miller is the number 2 wide receiver. He's new. He's kind of. I don't think that guy is. Braxton Miller is going to take away scoring opportunities from DeAndre Hopkins. So it's either Miller or Hopkins going to do the scoring for this, or the defense. And while they're not expected to score a whole lot, their team total is 23 points. So, there's supposed to be 3 touchdowns here. Who's going to get them? Maybe Hopkins gets one. Maybe Miller gets one. Maybe C.J. Fedorowicz gets one. I don't know, but the kicker, maybe the kicker will kick 3 field goals. I'd probably guess 2 touchdowns and 3 field goals here. So there's a couple that Hopkins could score 1 and Miller could score 1. The thing about those 2 guys are they're relatively inexpensive. So. And I think will be, again, super low owned. So there are definitely options that I'm looking at in some of these big GPPs.
Right, but saving it more for those big GPPs.
It's not a cash. I'm not sure. I think I do think Houston defense is cash playable, definitely.
Okay, but not the skilled players you were talking about.
No, because I just like other situations better. I don't mind those guys. But I will get to some other situations that I like more for cash.
Okay, well let's keep cruising. Philadelphia at Washington. This is a division rival game, of course, to open the season. We've got a 48-point total, which again is kind of middle of the road-ish. We've got a closer spread, which maybe implies a little bit of back and forth action, with Washington only being a 2.5-point favorite. And of course, the names that I'm going to immediately jump to, I mean, I drafted in my season-long league, so I'm a big Kirk Cousins fan this year. You got your Jordan Reed, you got guys like that. And I kind of even look a little bit over towards the Philly side with, like a Darren Sproles or something, because I don't know what the hell they're doing with LeGarrette Blount. Do you see things similarly, or are there other things that are catching your eye in sort of a different way?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, there are lots of other situations here. This game, I think, has a lot of potential. It's got a fairly high total. These guys played each other to high scores last season. One of the things I like about, and again, we don't know how, defenses and rankings translate from one year to another. So we really are working with a set of data that's not going to be perfect. But last season, the Eagles were good. They were a good defensive team. They were number one against tight ends, which is, I think, something that we need to pay attention to, particularly in this game. There's some chalk in this game, some big-time chalk on both sides. So actually there's a lot to cover. But the Eagles were number one against tight end position last season. They were very good against WR1. Okay against running back and quarterback. They were just a good defense last year. They also they are an opportunistic defense. They do turn the ball over a lot. And I just want to get on the Philly side of it. Looking at the Washington defense first, they were not good at pretty much anything. They were at the bottom of the league in every category statistically, and they haven't done much to make me think that that's going to change, right? So I love games where one of the defenses is bad. I just want to get into the chalk plays here. Number one, Zach Ertz for Philly is probably going to be the highest owned tight end on the slate across the board. Certainly on DraftKings. He's 3,500. Okay, everybody looks. We remember him putting up big numbers in the last few games of last season. There is a narrative. I mean, he left off week 17 putting up a 49-point game, right? He had a 25-point game on week 14. So Zach Ertz was coming on strong. One of our statistics that we're getting now from our new high-end data provider shows I wish I had it in front of me. This is part of our.
What do you need? I can pull it up
data,
while you're talking.
On the data, what do we have for Zach Ertz as far as his target share in this offense last year? Look that up real quick. But I'm just gonna keep going with this. Like, Ertz was a heavy target share guy. Like 28% of targets on his team went to him. Now the Eagles lost Jordan Matthews, who was kind of their slot guy. They put Nelson Aguilar in there, who is not good. So I think by default, Ertz actually should be targeted more, and having Alshon Jeffrey on the outside should actually potentially open some things up on the middle, because Alshon Jeffrey is a threat and a guy that you have to keep an eye on. So all the paper, all of the chalk, everything is pointing to Zach Ertz. What does it mean to me? He's in such a good spot, you almost can't fade him. But in GPPs, there are some other situations to consider that we're definitely going to consider. But in cash games, I mean, it's pretty easy to put Zach Ertz and his $3,500 salary, which is way too low, and mistakenly too low, to put him in your lineup and just hope that things continue as they do. If they give him 25% of the targets and they have to throw it a bunch because Washington is scoring, like, I like the idea of a game stack here, but if Washington is scoring, then Zach Ertz is probably going to be thrown to a lot on the flip side. And same with Alshon Jeffrey. Like, you can play him this week. No one's going to be on him. Everybody hates Alshon Jeffrey at this point, but he's a good player. He's cheap on these sites. He's a touchdown scorer. He's healthy. Why not? Why not? He's on the road facing a very bad defense in Washington, but a team that scores a lot in Washington. So there's that shootout potential. I definitely like game stacking this particular game. Now, looking at Washington, because it's a lot here, right?
Well, let me jump in with your
Go
numbers.
ahead.
Let me hit you with the Zach Ertz numbers. As far as targets last year, 106 targets, number 5 tight end. Target share, 19.7%, number 8 tight end. Red zone target share, 21.2%, number 15 tight end. And this was the one that got me in a PPR site like a DraftKings. He was the number 5 tight end in total receptions with 78. So solid.
This is a guy who's priced on DraftKings, okay, as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
He's not
9,
the 5th most
10,
expensive tight end.
11, 12, TE 13 on DraftKings. But he was the 5th highest scoring player, and he's in a perfect matchup. So that's just important to know. Everybody's going to be on if you're sharp, you're on this guy. He's too good of a spot to pass up. Again, unless we're talking about those big GPPs, which if you didn't listen to my bankroll management podcast, and it's an open to the public one that you should absolutely everybody. If you don't listen to this, you should find it on the DFSArmy.com website under DFS strategy. But you understand that we have to mentally approach cash and GPP completely differently. I think this guy will be so chalk in GPPs. There's some merit to not going all in. And there are some other players, especially on FanDuel, that I think I like just as much for similar money. Okay, all right. So jumping onto the Washington side, because we've covered a lot of on the Eagles side here. The one thing that's jumping out to me as I look at this, as I look at the numbers from last year, is how the Eagles were number 1 against the tight end position, right?
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm seeing, that DVP. If people are scrolling along, you look at that red box that says number 1 in it under tight end. That means the Eagles defended the tight end very, very well.
Last season in Week 14, the Eagles, the Redskins traveled to Philadelphia in a game that was, 22-27, a 48-point game, and 49-point game, and Jordan Reed got 1 reception, 10 yards, 2 points, right? Let me see if I can find the earlier game that year. No, because he didn't play. He was probably hurt for the first game of the season between these two teams. But I mean, the one game that they played, Reed didn't do shit. So it doesn't excite me to pay up for Jordan Reed this week. In this scenario, facing the number 1 defense against tight ends
in a bad matchup.
So who are they going to throw to, right? You don't have much of a running game here. You have Fat Rob and I don't know. I mean, some Pirine. You have there's a third down back on this team, Chris Thompson or something. So what I like about the Redskins is they tend to score through the air. Yes, Fat Rob can punch in a couple of. He's not a running back that's dynamic, taking passes out of the backfield. He's not a Le'Veon Bell. He's not a Melvin Gordon.
He's pretty game script dependent too, in that they need to be in first and second down situations, running situations to use him, or else they dump it off to other people. So he can be taken out of the game if they fall behind or whatever.
He's a classic GPP only game flow type running back, and so what I like about it is that means they're going to be doing their scoring through the air. Now, as good as Philly defense was last year, Washington's offense is also really good. So I definitely am comfortable. I like Cousins here. I like his pass catchers. I'm on the fence about Terrell Pryor just because it's their first game, and you almost want him to get like a rapport together before you start trusting a guy like him in these scenarios. But I definitely like Jamison Crowder here.
Yep.
I'd probably pair off Cousins with Crowder. You can take some shots. Or like Crowder's more like almost a cash play. Whereas I'd look at Terrell Pryor Sr. as more of like a GPP only scenario. I like Terrell Pryor this year. I think it's a great matchup for him, but I'm definitely concerned about his lack of playing time with Kirk Cousins and to see how that chemistry happens before I really want to invest, certainly in a cash game where, I don't want to have any kind of scenario. I want to reduce the number of risk factors with every player that I play. And, I think there are some risk factors with Terrell Pryor. That doesn't mean he can't go off. Like, he's a very, very athletic, talented guy, and he can go off for 2 touchdowns. Week 1, easily, definitely GPP playable, but I'm probably not going there in cash.
So, I mean, I just know for me, the shootout potential and stuff like that limits a little bit of my player selection. But I like how you're a little more wide open and you're thinking on multiple layers, than somebody like me. Like I said, I'm master of the obvious. That's why we've got you doing all the talking tonight.
Yeah, there we go. And one other thing I do want to mention, I never play Darren Sproles. I just never play him. So he could be great. I don't know. I never play.
You just shot my horse, man, because I wasn't going to play him anyway because I don't play a lot of tournaments. That's just not my game. But I know a couple of guys in the Army are big Darren Sproles fans, so maybe we're partially trolling them. Moving on to...
I just never do. I'm starting now. Like, if I was on the Sproles train, I don't like getting on the train, though this isn't much of a train, but I have this theory that, if I wasn't on the train when he was young, like, I ain't getting on the train when he's old. So
the train's just old and breaking down.
It's like literally been fading Frank Gore and drafting his backups every year for the last 5 years, just waiting for it to break down. Like, should I stop now? No, hell no. I'm going more. I'm doubling down on that. Like, I have Marlon Mack on every fucking fantasy bench, every team, period. Because I'm like, eventually he's gonna break down. Eventually I'll be right.
Yeah. That's right. You will be right eventually.
I'm just waiting for it.
Speaking of old farts, let's move into the Arizona and Detroit game. Arizona heads into Detroit, which really and truly is, to me, a rather chalky matchup. You've got a 49-point total, and the Lions are 2.5-point spread favorites. This game has kind of been down to like 1.5 points. I'm watching the line back and forth on this because, in fact, I think it's flip-flopped by now to Arizona being a 1.5 favorite, so I'm kind of looking at some old data right now. To me, that screams shootout potential. I don't necessarily like people on the road, but you've got old fart Carson Palmer, old fart Larry Fitzgerald, relatively old fart and newly highest paid player in Matt Stafford. I mean, is this kind of a game where everybody's kind of open even in cash, or are there limitations that you're putting on this mentally that you're wanting to see develop through the season before you really jump on them in week one?
Yeah, I mean, you have to. There are some defensive scenarios here that are in play. So I think number one is, because we're talking about this game, forget the defense, forget the DVPs and all of that. David Johnson is the top player on the board week one. Of any player on any team, he's the number one player overall. I get it, he's on the road. It doesn't matter. He's the number one player. He is basically matchup proof. He is going to be playing in a dome. I mean, he's the number one play on the board. So that's important to note. Now, I do have a couple of plays I really, really like on this game. I don't generally take a lot of players facing the Arizona defense. Arizona is good on defense, right? They're a very good defensive team. They have Patrick Peterson. I would assume he's going to be locked in on Golden Tate. So, who is the other wide receiver for the Lions? There's Marvin Jones Jr. or this other guy.
Marvin.
Well, maybe. Or maybe it's this other guy, Galladay. So we don't really know which one they're going to feature. Kenny Galladay, right? So we don't know. Galladay was kind of a preseason guy, and he's a highly sort of hyped rookie. We don't know who's number 2 and number 3 is. I'm not fucking around with that. And I really don't want to use Golden Tate because, Arizona has a really, really top quality corner, and, I assume he'll be on Tate. You look at Ebron, the tight end. But Arizona's really good against the tight end. Freaking Honey Badger's out there stopping the tight end. I ain't touching that dude. So, I mean, then you have Amir Abdullah at running back. I'm not convinced he's going to show the volume. So really, I basically don't want any part of the Lions offense here. Nothing. There's nothing I'm interested in. On Arizona, there is a second player that I very much like, and it's not old man Fitzgerald. Although Fitzgerald's fine, and he, I believe, is somewhat underpriced on DraftKings at 5,900. He's pretty consistent, pretty consistent guy. But who do I like, man? You know.
I'm guessing you like the Sheriff.
You know I like the Sheriff. John Brown. He's healthy.
Sheriff's coming to town.
You know I like him. This is another one of those. I've been on the Sheriff train for so many years. I'm not getting off now, man. He's finally healthy. So
you've been on the Sheriff train as long as you've been off the core train.
That's right. So I'm finding John Brown in a lot of my lineups, man. I like John Brown here. He's healthy.
This is John Brown, not Jerron Brown.
No.
Big difference.
No, this isn't.
I
read.
Just clarifying.
But I was on. I go on some of these groups and I read some articles and stuff. I was reading an article the other day by someone on one of these free sites that keep popping up all over the place. These DFS advice sites where they're populated by people who literally know virtually nothing about anything. And I'm reading this article. It's so funny. You read their stuff and you're like, "What are you talking? How do you advise? Like, where do you get off writing like advising people? Like, you don't know shit." I read these articles. So this guy's like talking about Jaron Brown and how he's been elevated to the number 2 wide receiver. He's a great value pick week 1, Jaron Brown, and I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" This person doesn't even know the difference between John Brown and Jaron Brown. He's looking at this fucking advising people to play the 5th string wide receiver for Arizona. I mean, you're just like, where do these guys? Or they're sharing lineups that are so bad and putting it. And like, what is this? It's not even constructed with any sort of thought. So there's so much of that goes around. I really feel for people out there who are kind of trying to find sources of information and just stumbling onto things, because my goodness, the quality level is just so crazy.
The beauty is, if you finally stumbled across us, I believe you found it.
I think so too.
I believe you found something. Now, my little throw out there of Jaron Brown versus John Brown may or may not have been a rather, I'm going to coin the phrase right now, #chalk troll to set you up and get you off, but whatever works. Who else is in this game that's worth mentioning, or should we move on?
No, I mean, that's it. You have, obviously, I'm not going to get too excited. I mean, you could play Carson Palmer as a punt, I guess, but he's not really quite cheap enough to make me want to go nuts on him. I will state that in the past few seasons, the Lions in particular have been terrible the first few weeks of the season defensively, and then they've picked it up. So, maybe it's that this is their terrible game, but Palmer's so old. I'm never quite sure how these old guys come out of the gate. I mean, it's just tough with any for week 1. Are you on your game? Are you sort of rusty? Did you practice a ton? Did you take hits in practice? So I never quite know, but I definitely don't hate Carson Palmer. I don't love him here. I don't hate it, but I'm more so. I definitely like John Brown, and I think David Johnson is the top play of the week. So those are the
top to bottom. He's number 1. I'll tell you what. This is interesting enough to me. I wanted to ask you a question because I put this spot in for people that are following along in the graphics. That coupon code podcast that you mentioned. I mean, I know there's a link in there for a free trial offer where we've got a few sites. If somebody's new, wants to try a different site, you can check them out. Check us out for 30 days for free. And then if you want to stick around, great. The podcast coupon code, that's 20% off, right? For the life of a membership.
Yeah. Part of, if you like this podcast and you like what we do and you want to hear, for example, my actual player picks for the week where I get down and dirty with our VIP pod, where I get down and dirty with actual picks and I really talk about cash strategy versus GPP strategy, small GPP, large, like we get down and dirty with everything, lineup construction, all of that. If you want to hear it, my first suggestion is take advantage of the free offer. Sign up for one of these sites that we promote. It's so easy. I don't want to take your money. Put $20 down on PlayDraft. Sign up for an account there. Let us know. We give you a month free. Check out the group. Worst case scenario, you say you guys suck. I'm out. What did you lose? You got an account on PlayDraft where you got to play it, your own money. We don't take your money. If you want to stick around, awesome. We'd love to have you on the team. The podcast coupon code, I want to get the free month. Okay. We have support the podcast coupon code, where you use that code. It's written here on this article, and they lock in at 20% off their monthly premiums forever. That we are already the best deal, like as far as our Domination Station Optimizer, our project, no one does what we do, and the ones that come close charge double. $39, $49, $59, $69 a month or more. I've seen ridiculous pricing. So part of what I've done with the site is I've tried to keep it, keep the price point where everybody can afford it. Our whole goal is to help average Joes compete like the DFS pros, and that's just what we're doing. And helping average Joes compete like pros doesn't mean jacking up the price of the membership so high that only actual pro players can afford it. So I've really tried to target an audience where we do have pro players. We have some of the top players in the world as part of our group. We have multiple $100,000 winners. That the screenshots are posted. One of our members, I believe, is one of the best players in the world, and he started off a couple years ago as just a regular Joe, and he's now one of the best players in the world. These are the people who are advising us. You have top ranked on Roto Grinders. This is who we're talking to in our Slack forum. So that's why we take it to another level. We really kind of try to know what we're talking about, and I personally pride myself on always striving to learn. I read every DFS book. You try to keep up with the times, so I am not just bringing fantasy football knowledge, but rather bringing DFS advanced kind of strategy knowledge to the table. So
awesome.
Let's jump on to the next.
It was a lot more than I would have given out there. That was pretty sweet. Next game is another shootout potential game. Huge high total of 52 points. It's only a 1-point spread. We've got Oakland visiting Tennessee. I hear a lot of talk about Marcus Mariota, Delaney Walker being very, very cash safe plays. I kind of wonder more about the other side of the ball with Derek Carr and the Amari Cooper versus Michael Crabtree type saga. Who's he going to throw to? He kind of throws to each equally. Do you have a preference over there? Do you kind of feel like most people do with the Tennessee sides maybe a little bit more cash friendly, but the Oakland side's a little more GPP, or are you just kind of wide open on this game?
No, I think this is cash friendly across the board. If we have our GPP alert siren, or not our GPP, our chalk alert siren, this is probably the game to fire it up for, because 52-point total, very close. High-scoring game. This will be the game. This game will produce a ton of players, right, that are being used this week, I believe.
Fantasy goodness.
Yeah, lots of fantasy goodness coming here
from
both
last
sides.
Year.
Now, the one concern is, I don't know how much weight to put in this, but Mariota didn't look very good in the preseason. Kind of didn't look his best, but I don't know if I put a lot into that. I think it's just bullshit. So I'm just going to ignore that. And we'll look at some of the numbers. The only real defensive numbers that are pertinent here, and I don't know how pertinent they really are. Tennessee, the Titans were pretty good against running backs last year, and the Raiders were pretty good against WR1s. Now, it's not super important because I'm not going to be playing Marshawn Lynch this week. He's not on my radar as a running back I want to use. And I'm not really sure who is considered the WR1 for Tennessee, so I don't think that that's so pertinent. Who's the Rashard Matthews, Derek Decker or Corey Davis? I don't know. I don't think the Raiders know. So I don't know if they had this great cornerback who's stopping opposing WR1s. I don't know which one they're going to put him on. So for the Titans, I really like Eric Decker, if he's healthy. You got to like Marcus Mariota just in general. You can look at the tight end because the Raiders are really bad against the tight end position. So, again, in that GPP sneaky scenario, you get Delaney Walker in there because, everybody's using Ertz. So anything other than Ertz, I would say, is like GPP week 1. A low-owned GPP week 1. And I could even see a situation of comboing a Mariota to Delaney Walker kind of stack. Again, Eric Decker's a touchdown catcher. And, of course, DeMarco Murray is used in the passing game and in the rushing game. So there's a lot to like on the Tennessee side of the ball. And, every year, I will tell you this right now, Marcus Mariota is going to be the nuts quarterback 3 or 4 weeks out of the season. He just always is. For the Raiders, I think it's Carr, Cooper, and Crabtree. That's the trio that we're looking at. They don't have much of a tight end over there. I think Jared Cook is there, but he ain't much of a tight end. And then and I don't trust
former Ram. No, he wasn't.
Well, the Ram, and then listen. If you couldn't do it that well with Aaron Rodgers, you got problems. So I mean, he was okay, but no, it's Cooper and Crabtree, and I think
So
a lot of people.
it's just that triumvirate you're looking at there.
Yeah. Now,
Pretty
if you look at the numbers say, oh, the Titans were bad against the WR2 last year. Look at this 31 ranking, right? So you're like, ooh, Crabtree. Okay. But I like Cooper, too. I mean, Cooper's the more dynamic player, and I think more people are oddly going to be... I don't know if it's oddly. I do think Crabtree's going to be higher owned. And again, so it's one of these situations where is Crabtree the cash play and Cooper is the GPP play? Maybe. All I know is I want exposure to this game, and I probably want exposure to both of those guys. Cooper comes at a premium price on both sites. I'm going to look at the two of them, 7,200 versus 6,000 on DraftKings, and on FanDuel. Let's see if we can find those numbers. Oakland, Tennessee. Here we go. So Cooper and Crabtree, 76 versus 69. So not as big of a discrepancy. The big knock on Cooper has been, I mean, listen, he kills you sometimes. But I like these situations where it makes you uncomfortable to play a guy. Like last year, he just didn't score fucking touchdowns. He had this problem. He couldn't score touchdowns. And, and he'd give you these dud games, and you'd pay up for him in these great situations. So Cooper's been definitely an inconsistent player. But, it's another year in the system. I think the touchdown regression will eventually, come back around. And I think that's just bad luck.
That's the question for me, because his red zone targets were way, way down the first couple of years of his career. So I'm wondering if they're going to start earning some trust and bouncing back. That's one for me. It's definitely a wait and see. And he's more of a GPP threat. The Crabtree gets targeted in the red zone, so I like him there.
Unless they change things around this year. I mean, you don't know. It's a new year.
That's the thing, and that's kind of what you're saying is touchdown regression at some point might take over for these two. Because I will tell you, if you look at their overall target share, both of them are just about the same. Carr is pretty indiscriminate with those two until he gets into the red zone. Then he favors Crabtree over Cooper. Maybe this is a year where defenses think that, and so he favors Cooper over Crabtree. Who the hell knows right now?
Very tough to say. It really isn't. But Crabtree was definitely a consistent player. But again, he was the more consistent player. I mean, there's just no last year. The one thing I would note about Crabtree was, for whatever reason, whenever a quality defense turned up, like he would put up a dud. Like this guy, like clockwork. Houston, Denver, last season, KC. Anytime they played a good defense, you get a dud out of. There's Houston and Denver again, 3.5. Like it's amazing how consistent he was as far as being terrible against quality defenses. But that's not really in play this week. So if I didn't mention it as well, David Carr absolutely in play here. I think he's cash playable as well, and I think you got to kind of do the Carr, Cooper, Crabtree shuffle, and pair them up with either the different ones in the tournaments, and even do some game stacks here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was what I was going to ask you too. If you do a Mariota, Walker, and then a Cooper, or Carr, Crabtree, and then a Walker, or something like that. Definitely. That would be something that would be catching both sides of this game. That's likely to go off on paper, and that's obviously what we look for because we're trying to pin down the production on the slate. We've got 16 games to pick from. This is the highest total. What's the chalk eater telling you? Focus on this game. Duh.
This is a big time. It's the highest total of the week. That means people are going to be all over it.
Absolutely.
Maybe a fade in GPPs for that reason, by the way. I mean, there's a thought that says, maybe fade it in GPP.
Yeah, take the second, third highest total games and whatnot.
Yeah. Again, especially in those massive. Listen, week one we have GPPs with 700,000. I mean, this is more of the stuff I'll talk about on the VIP pod later on. I like to get more into strategy, but I mean. You have these 700,000 entrant. If you're doing the same thing as other people, you're not winning it. I mean, and it's not even worth bothering to enter those contests to try to cash because you're not cashing high. So
you're just a sucker at that point. You're a sucker bloating the pot. I mean,
exactly. Those are sucker bets anyway. But if you're going to get in there, let your freak flag fly. Get silly with it. Don't do what everybody else is doing. They're not going to win. You got to go completely wackadoodle compared to what the field is doing. And you can do that in a smart way, but certainly being chalky is not going to work.
Well, and that's why you would fade that game. Now, would you pay any attention to Tampa Bay going into Miami? I know you say you don't fade games. I'm not saying this game's fadeable. I'm just kind of wondering where I might go there. If I was fading the first game we mentioned, the Tennessee game, obviously we would go up toward maybe the Arizona game. Is there anybody in this Tampa Bay and Miami game that you would want to play? I mean, would you ever think of Jay Cutler? It's a 47-point total. It's a 1-point spread. It's another shootout potential. I mean, Mr. Don't give an F. He's flying high down there in Miami right now.
I mean, no. But maybe in the wacky game, again, in those massive GPPs, do whatever you want. There is no wrong. Yeah, play Jay Cutler. But realistically, number one, there's a couple of things going on here. This game might get moved. There's a hurricane heading for Miami. We don't know what's going on with this game. It could be moved to Friday. This could be pulled from most of the slates. So something to note. But because regardless of what happens, it'll probably at least be in the Thursday through Monday slate. So we have to talk about the game. And, Jameis Winston hasn't looked great in the preseason. He's looked great in terms of his leadership. I loved this season of Hard Knocks. I mean, it's awesome. And watching Jameis Winston as a man and as a person, like he's an inspirational person. I didn't know that much about his personality, but now I love this guy. Like, his personality is fantastic. And he's a leader, and I like all of that. But he hasn't looked great in the preseason. So, I'm not super excited about him maybe necessarily week one when he's still getting his shit together. But that said, there's another philosophy or thought process that says, don't worry about the preseason. These guys come out week one and they're going to be ready to roll. And if he is, this is a pretty good situation for Winston. He's got a lot of weapons this year. They added Deshaun Jackson, who I love, and I'm using him actually week one quite a bit. And I'm going to tell you why. But obviously, Mike Evans is always in play every single week. He's a super stud. And they have Jacquizz Rodgers at running back, who also has potential, and he's priced low. And he's not low enough, but he's priced low on some of these sites. So, if I need some salary relief, Jacquizz at $4,900, not bad. The reason I like Deshaun Jackson, though, and this actually comes a little bit from watching Hard Knocks. They're going to feed this guy. They respect Deshaun Jackson. He came in as a veteran, but a veteran who commands respect. You see them appreciating his speed, what he's done, and I just don't see the way that Jameis Winston is. I don't see him ignoring Deshaun Jackson week one. He's going to try to get him the ball and get him involved. He's going to try to get all his guys, Evans and all that. So, will they connect? I don't know. But I do know that they will take some shots to Jackson this week. And what they're going to try to do is take advantage of the fact that teams have been double and triple teaming Mike Evans the past couple of years. Like, Evans could be so much better if he doesn't have a safety over top on every single play that he's ever involved in. But he has, because there's never been any other threat on this team. So, there are certain situations where I don't like a quality second wide receiver comes in, and you don't like it because they take away from your stud guy. But in this case, I think these two wide receivers are complement each other really, really well. They don't do the same things. And what Deshaun Jackson does with taking the top off the defense is going to open things up for Evans as well. But you have to first get the ball to Deshaun. And I like him. When he's healthy, he's super fast. So he's very cheap this week. So I definitely like Deshaun Jackson. If I can afford Mike Evans or a Winston Evans kind of stack, sure, that's more of a GPP special for me. But I like Deshaun even potentially in cash games just because the salary savings. Again, in cash, we're really trying to pay up, get these stud running backs in there. And what I'm trying to get out of my wide receivers is, just a solid floor with some decent upside. Like, I think Deshaun Jackson brings 20-point upside. 2 receptions. One of them he takes to the house. Yeah, he always has that upside. He could take his first he could take 60 yards and a touchdown. He's already got you 15 points. That's it. Done. Good day for Deshaun. Does it again, and he's got a great day. Or has a second or third, 5 receptions, 90 yards, a touchdown. Great. It's 5,000. That gets you 20 points. I'll take it. That's GPP winning numbers. So
it's amazing, though. I never thought I'd hear you say he was cash viable.
He is, because he's cheap, and I truly feel that seeing Winston and his personality, he will not ignore this vet who's new on the team. He respects him. He's going to throw him the ball. His first game, he's going to throw it to him. He's going to.
You think he schedules for, say, 8-9 targets?
I think 6 or 7. But with the Deshaun Jackson at a low price, that's
enough.
It
only takes 1 or 2. I know. I get you there.
Deshaun Jackson's in a similar boat to John Brown. I like both these guys. They're not possession receivers. These are 2 wide receivers that are going deep and catching 60-yard touchdowns. If they don't get the receptions or if they can't connect, they'll have those opportunities. Will they make the catch? I don't know, but I'll feel vindicated if they have 3 or 4 opportunities. You just need to catch 1 and you made value. You catch 2 of them and you've well exceeded your value. And, I'm hoping they can catch, 3 out of the 6 or 7 or, 4 out of the 7 targets, and I think they'll be okay.
But if he catches 4 out of 7 targets, Deshaun Jackson will be plenty fine.
He should be. I mean, even if he didn't get a touchdown out of it, but he gets you 90 yards. Because he's not throwing going short to
right.
Deshaun.
He doesn't run 8-yard slants.
That's what I'm saying. He's going to, and even if I'd like him to run some fucking slants, because get me some of those cheap points. But you can't have it all. It'd be a lot more expensive if he did. But all right, so Miami, right?
Definitely watch the weather in this one, though. Just to recap that one.
Yeah, I think this game is going to be moved. I think it's going to be taken off the main slate. So I'm really more talking about for the big slate. But looking at Miami, it's going to be a neutral field if they move it, right? So it's no longer like really a home game for them. But yeah, I guess you could play Cutler in a GPP. I think he's got to get used to his wide receivers first. I don't know how he's going to look. He's definitely said nice things about Devontae Parker, so that's probably the wide receiver you might consider pairing him up with.
So much so I about called Alshon back with the Philly comment about the slow Devontae Parker.
Yeah, I mean, right? That's pretty dick, but what an asshole. But no, Parker is. Listen, Parker's on my Dynasty team, and I'm waiting for him to break out, man. I want to be able to plug him into my lineups. I haven't been able to use him. But I like Devontae. I definitely like Parker more than Jarvis Landry. I'm not sure that Jarvis Landry... Jarvis Landry's good, too. I mean, he's fine. But, he plays... I just don't trust him. He's too expensive for what I'm concerned about. Tannehill used to focus in on Landry and just pepper him with targets every game. But we don't know that Cutler's going to do that. And Landry's entire scoring was always volume-based. So I don't really trust Landry. I definitely don't care for him very much on FanDuel. And I don't really like his salary level on DraftKings enough to... I mean, it's funny. Him and Parker are the same price on DraftKings, actually. But Parker has that big play capability that Landry just doesn't have. So I'm not sure I'm going to be on either of these guys week 1, but, we'll see. And then Ajayi's in play. I mean, you got to play him. The Bucs last year were not great against the run. And if this game stays close, then it's probably because Ajayi is doing his thing. So you can play him. Let's see what his salary level looks like. I mean, he's probably not cheap. I mean, he's right up there. So he's at 6,500 on DraftKings and priced right in the Jordan Howard, Melvin Gordon price range, not too far below Devonta Freeman. So I probably like Freeman a little more.
It's about where he was getting drafted in season-long stuff anyway, so it's kind of parallel. I know they're different disciplines, but
yeah, it's similar.
They're kind of on the same quality tier 2 running back type guys.
If you ever if you're doing your season-long draft and you haven't done it yet for whatever reason, I just did my last one tonight. But if you haven't done it yet, look at the salaries on DraftKings or FanDuel as your guide. That is as good of a guide as anything else a lot of the time. So, we look at our PPR rankings and all of this, and, obviously I put out my my draft guide on the DFSArmy.com website, but if you want to keep it simple, just look at the salaries of some of these guys, and, that's a pretty good indication of where they should go. Not always. It's not a foolproof, like Darren McFadden's, 6,100 on DraftKings. not cool DraftKings. But I mean, really, I get that he's starting, but really, so not everyone, but certainly it's a pretty good indication of where he should be drafting people. My issue with Ajayi is, again, he's surrounded by plays that might kind of look a little better on paper. Be it, Todd Gurley for 500 less. Certainly, Dalvin Cook is interesting for less, and Ty Montgomery. So there are other situations that are cheaper that look a little bit better, which might make him more of like a GPP special, low ownership kind of play, which I like. Let's get crazy with those. I think that's about it for that one.
Sweet. Well, let's move to another division rival game to open the season. We got Baltimore in Cincinnati. 43-point total, pretty low. 2-point spread favoring the home team in Cincinnati, which I'm not excited about this game, honestly, at all. I mean, you're going to have to talk me into a couple of players here, because even with the perfect suspension we mentioned earlier in the week, that kind of takes us off the defense. I'm not a big Dalton lover. I do like AJ Green. I will say that. I'm sure you'll probably start with his name. But who else is even playable?
Yeah, it's not a ton. I mean, at one point I thought that Flacco wasn't going to be healthy for this game, and I was much more interested in the Bengals' defense at that point. But it looks like Flacco's going to play. But he's also coming off an injury, so it doesn't make you excited for his offense. And they don't have much offense on the Ravens at all this year, but I mean, I guess Macklin and Wallace. But it's tough for me to get excited for them. Facing a tough Cincinnati defense, they're not the kind of defense you're scared of, especially losing Burfict, their best linebacker, and losing Pac-Man Jones. So they've lost a couple of their best players on defense. So they don't scare me defensively. But they always play the Ravens pretty tough, and these games always play out pretty low scoring. And with no Flacco, I think it's going to be like a lot of slow plotting run type things going on here. All that said, AJ Green is always in play. But that's about, and the one guy I probably like the most here, although it's a little scary with the defensive rankings, but I like Tyler Eifert. I mean, Eifert's not hurt.
Yeah, I slipped my mind for a second there, but he's always got 2 TD upside at random times. So. And
he started off the season last year with like a 3-touchdown game.
Sure he did.
I know that's a little weird, but I feel like these guys, sometimes there's a pattern where they like have these amazing first games. So. It's as good as any other reason to play someone in DFS, so, why not? Now, all that said, there's a little caution here in that the Ravens had a very, very good ranking against the tight ends last year, but they're also in a division that outside of Eifert, and Eifert was probably hurt most of the season, I'm not sure that there's that many tight ends that attack the defense in that division.
The next best one was probably their own in Dennis Pitta.
Who else is in that division? Pittsburgh didn't have a tight end last year, and the Bengals had Eifert, but again, he was hurt most of the year, and so there's just not that many. It's tough to trust. I don't. These DVP stats can be deceiving, and I don't want to lean on them too much. But I mean, if you do want to lean on it, that number that last year they were number one against them. So I mean. Something to keep in mind. But I like Eifert maybe as more of a GPP kind of situation.
Sure. Like I said, 2 TD upside all the time. So let's blow through to Pittsburgh and Cleveland. Pittsburgh travels up into Cleveland. This is another one of those games that the road team has the huge point spread. I mean, Pittsburgh's carrying a 9-point favorite into this game. And it's a 47.5-point total, which of course means that Pittsburgh's going to score the lion's share of them, which, I mean, Le'Veon Bell, Ben Roethlisberger, who's, priced up accordingly, Antonio Brown, the household names that we've been studying for 4 or 5 years that are just blind rosters when you can throw them in there.
Yeah, and there's more too. There's more.
And then we've got a rookie starting in Cleveland. I don't know what to think of him. So, I mean, I know that, okay, you want to play the left side of the game and play Pittsburgh. It's chalk, chalk, chalk. What about anything else? I mean, is this just kind of lopsided, one-sided game, or do you see scenarios for playing some Cleveland guys?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different things in play here. You can't talk about Pittsburgh without going into the whole Ben Roethlisberger home-road splits. So you really have to start there. There is a now pattern going back the last couple of years, and I think it's now we're in 3 years of it, where Roethlisberger just plays like shit on the road. Like this team they disappoint from a fantasy points perspective in road games, and they've been doing it for a few years. But here's the thing: everybody's onto that now. Everybody knows it. This is no secret. Last year, everybody was still kind of like, it's bullshit, right? But now it's become an accepted thing. So now it's almost time to get off that train of fading Pittsburgh on the road and saying, hey, wait a minute, everybody thinks that, so let's do the opposite of what the field thinks and actually play these guys. So I just want to point out that's a little DFS strategy thought I have for this thing, where just everybody's aware of the whole Ben Roethlisberger home road split. And now, for years they've been playing him thinking, GPP. But maybe now's the time when that actually changes. And this is as good of a spot as any for the Steelers to kind of turn it around. Cleveland's just not good defensively in any area. And, Pittsburgh's loaded up with weapons. You have Martavis Bryant now, and you have Le'Veon Bell, who might be on a pitch count, according to Herm Edwards. I don't know what the fuck Herm Edwards knows, but according to some blurb from Herm Edwards, he's like, they might only give Bell 15 to 20 touches week 1. Now, if they only give Bell 15 to 20 touches, then what else?
That's got to be fake news, though.
I mean, Herm Edwards. I don't know.
I think that Bell was on the field for 95% of their snaps last year when he was in the game. I mean, when he was playing outside of the suspension.
This is what I'm saying.
96% led the league in snap percentage or snap share. How the hell is that guy going to be on a pitch count?
I don't know.
That's interesting.
But Herm Edwards
just feels like fake news.
It does feel like fake news. But if it's true, then what are they going to do? They're going to bring in Connor or the other guy, and they're not going to give it to him, so they're going to throw it. And I think part of the reason
if it's true, I want a rebate on my $9,000 salary.
That's why I'm saying you play David Johnson week 1.
Right.
I love Le'Veon Bell always, but I mean if they're gonna limit his snaps because he's he held out most of the preseason, and there's a reason behind it. He held out most of the preseason, and so he's getting into shape, and maybe he's not in game shape. They don't want to risk an injury the first week, and especially in a game like this against a team that's such crap, they could not ride their horse all the way to the end, but rather kind of take it easy week 1, get their guys stretched out a little bit. I could see, there are some situations.
Is that the kind of game where you might watch for some late Vegas line movement to see if Vegas picks up on the fact that maybe there's some leaking information that Bell's on a pitch count and that spread goes from -9 to maybe -6 or something like that?
No, because I don't think it changes the spread. I mean, it's almost worse if you have Roethlisberger just throwing it late. I mean, he's going to be throwing touchdowns to Martavis, to Antonio Brown. So, okay. It's just more of I know it's a road game and I'm not supposed to play Roethlisberger or his pass catchers, but I kind of like Roethlisberger and his pass catchers here. Like, Cleveland had the worst defense against all things. Wide receivers scored a shitload against them. Quarterbacks scored the most against Cleveland of any team last year. So I haven't seen them improve. So I don't see any reason why Ben Roethlisberger shouldn't have a huge game. So in the case of this game, here's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at Ben. I'm looking at Steelers defense. I like Martavis Bryant very much. I like Antonio Brown. I like all kinds of stacks involving Ben, Antonio Brown, and Martavis Bryant. I'm not super in love with Le'Veon Bell because of the Herm Edwards blurb.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't need a lot to make me want to fade the most expensive player on the card. I don't think in a GPP, quite honestly, that you can win one using the most expensive running back. I don't think that works. The reason is, if Le'Veon Bell at 90, this is again strategy. This is really more of the stuff we'll talk about on the VIP DFS Army pods, but for the members only. But I'm going to spit a little something out here so people know really how DFS works. Le'Veon Bell at 9,800 on DraftKings. Yeah, he's in a great spot. I can't fade him. He's too good. This is a cash play. It's not a GPP play. And the reason it's not a GPP play is because, let's say Bell puts up 30 points. Great. What is it going to take for me to win a massive GPP with 100,000 entrants? Getting 30 points from the most expensive guy on the board? No. I have to find the running back who costs $5,000 or $4,000 or $6,000 or $3,500 that gets me 30 points. That's how you win. And trust me, one of them will. It'll be somebody who shocks you. We don't know. Carlos Hyde at 4,600. Maybe C.J. Anderson has a big day. I don't know. But we don't know. That's why they're cheaper. Maybe it's Lamar Miller. At home, he puts up 28 points. The point is this. You will not win your GPP generally, with some exceptions. But generally, you're not going to win that GPP taking the most expensive player on the board and having them even, do fine or have a big game. Now, that said, there was a week last week or a few weeks last week where, there was a week last week where Le'Veon Bell put up 49 points. It was a crazy game. A week like that, yeah, he'll win you your week. He was actually. I'm going to find it because he fucked me in the fantasy playoffs. Week 14. Okay, anybody else who played season long? Week 14, Le'Veon Bell put up 54.8 DraftKings points. Now, 54.8, I believe, is the highest DraftKings score of any player ever. I could be wrong, but if it's not, it's pretty damn close to it. Okay, so 236 yards. 38 attempts rushing, bunch of receptions. It was a crazy game. 3 touchdowns. I don't know how you score more than this. So, but he's not doing that this week. I mean, because even if they don't keep him on a snap count of 15 to 20 snaps, I mean, I don't know if they're going to give him 45 touches in this game. His first game back, he's been, out. He hasn't played a lot. All right, let's see. Bell said he's ready for any kind of workload Sunday against Cleveland. ESPN's Jeremy Eric Fowler reports 30 touchers or whatever, 10 touches, it may be. I'm ready to go out there. No, it's not. I mean, the fact that 2 people are talking about this snap count. No, the fake news is the player says, I'm ready for whatever it is. Of course he's going to say that.
That's what I mean.
That doesn't mean they're going to give him 30. Now we have a secondary sort of confirmation that, no, they might keep him on a snap count. So I'm fading this guy in favor of the cheaper David Johnson or some other situations. I'm fading him in cash. I'm probably going to fade him in GPPs as well. That said, if he's on your season-long team, man, use the shit out of him. Are you crazy? It's Le'Veon Bell. What are you, nuts? But I'm saying in a GPP, he's not going to win it for you unless he puts up 40 points, and he's not doing that in a week where they're going to limit his touches. So, again, in the GPP, I need to find the cheaper guy that puts up 25 points. Just, copping out and using Le'Veon Bell, that's kind of a donkey move, I think, this week. And let's not be donkeys. Did I forget anyone? Oh, I just want to talk Martavis Bryant. I fucking love Martavis Bryant this week. I think they're going to try to get him involved. He's a big play guy. He scores touchdowns. He's cheap. I like pairing him up with Ben, like I said, and I certainly like Antonio Brown as well. Again, on the Cleveland side, not much to like. I mean, I guess, I don't know. You want to play Crowell? He's one of those GPP-only specials, I would call it. Steelers' defense isn't that stifling that I don't think
that's
Cleveland
where I
could
would
do
say
stuff.
There's a feather in the Crowell cap, but, I mean, game flow goes directly against you, and Duke Johnson's their third down back usually anyway, so.
I mean, Duke Johnson you play as a GPP special. Kenny Britt's cheap, and he's their number one. Is he their number one wide receiver, I guess? So,
I think by default, I think he is.
I mean, I don't know who else is. So yeah, I mean, he's not even that cheap. It's crazy. Corey Coleman. I think last year, I remember in the early weeks, I think Peter Jennings was, or Al Smizzle, one of these guys was on Corey Coleman, and he had that one big game where he put up 28 points and won somebody a millionaire maker. Game 2, he puts up 30 points for 4,700. And I think Al Smizzle won the Millie Maker or something that week. Ridiculous. But week 2 of last season. So, Corey Coleman, he's there too. Can play him. They're going to be throwing a lot. So, you could. There's a few things you can do with Cleveland. But I definitely like the Steelers' defense as well. That's it.
Well, fair enough for me.
How are we doing on time? How are we on time?
You are about an hour and 25 minutes.
Oh my God! All right, let's keep it rolling.
We're flying. That's week 1. We're rusty too. We're Tom Brady. What can we say? As far as Indianapolis going into, I wanted to call them St. Louis again. I can't get out of the habit, but the LA Rams, Indianapolis at LA. The real question here, I mean, I know it's a 47-point total, and Indianapolis is the 3.5-point favorite on the road, but there's it doesn't sound like Andrew Luck's going to play. I know
he's definitely not playing. He's out.
Okay, that's not front page news. How does that affect T.Y. Hilton?
Horrifically. This is weird. I don't get the spread here at all. This is one of those games, like, I think I might jump on my book and bet it.
Right.
Because
I thought I'd see it flip too when Luck was announced out. I thought I'd see the Rams pick up the favorite there, but
honestly, it makes me want to jump on right now before it changes. But I don't understand this spread at all. Scott Tolzien or something is the quarterback for the Colts. He's never been good. He's really bad. And they don't have a running game to really take over.
Timeout.
Has it flipped?
I'm looking at VegasInsider.com right now. The line obviously opened at Indianapolis 3.5-point favorite, 48-point over under.
Oh, now the Rams are 3.5-point favorites.
The consensus is right now that all of the sports books consensus average, whatever, is Rams 3.5-point favorite, 41-point total.
Son of a bitch.
So it's gone from a 48 down to a 41. You missed your flip.
Should have gotten on there sooner, man.
Flip by 6. That's what I thought it would do. So,
all right. So
if you're scrolling along, I apologize. Just flip the green and the yellow squares from 3.5 points to one side to the other, and you're caught up with us.
Yeah, I mean, let's put that. Let's definitely make a note of that.
We'll change. We'll change it.
That's unfortunate. So I mean, I was like, oh my god, I'm going to bet this. So basically, the Rams, the Colts are going to be terrible. You can't play anybody from that team. The Rams have a good defense. The Colts have no quarterback, and they have no running game.
Mm-hmm.
Tolzien's going to throw it to... I mean, it's not a difficult offense to defend against when they don't have a quality quarterback because they don't have a running back who can scare anyone. Frank Gore is a plodding, slow, can't break away from anything 34-year-old man. So they're not going to do anything. So I hate the Colts, everything about them in this game. Without Andrew Luck, they're just not the same team, and they don't have a backup quarterback that can, replicate anywhere near what Andrew Luck does. So, fuck them. Fade them. Rams defense in play, very sneaky. They're at home. Rams have a new coach, a dynamic and exciting coach. I think he's going to have them firing on all cylinders. I think they're going to come out of the gate strong. So, I'm really excited to use a lot of Rams defense this week. And Todd Gurley. I mean, those are the only two playable. And even, here's a crazy one. You can pair up a defense with a kicker. So, I guess
absolutely.
Legatron, right?
Yeah, that's what Greg the Leg. Legatron, Megatron, Greg the Leg. That's what they called him here in St. Louis.
Right, so Zerline in play potentially as a kicker. I could see where they might kick 5 field goals in this game because they can't fucking score. Or Todd Gurley comes in. But, I mean, this is a Gurley Rams defense. I mean, you can't trust Goff or his pass catchers. So, I mean, that's it. And fade the Colts, 100%. I mean, the Colts are so wacky. I guess you could play the Tolzien to Ty Hilton combo in on the $3 1 million entrant, milli maker on DraftKings just because you want to go so ridiculous that using a stack that no one will use. But outside of that, no, fade them. Don't even think about it.
Good enough for me. I mean, I that brings the Rams defense and Gurley into favor for me too, because once that favorite flipped, boy, it's just like, holy cow.
It's funny, we were just having an argument about this yesterday on the site where I'm like, I guess they're favored, but man, I'm like, I guess I'm nuts. I thought there would be massive underdogs. I thought there would at least be slight underdogs, and and I looked at them like, oh shit, they were favored even as of yesterday. So, I guess it came around. But I mean, literally yesterday, we were having this argument with people. I was like, they were like,
almost
no.
Well, it must not have flipped yet. I don't know when it flipped, but that was crazy. I'm glad we looked that up. So moving on to another 4:00 game, you got Seattle heading to Green Bay. I think this one has a lot of sneaky shootout potential to it for a lot of different reasons.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's even sneaky.
Well, I think that people are going to go to Atlanta and Pittsburgh and, the Tennessee-Oakland game. And I think this one, it's not necessarily going to slip completely under the radar. The game total's 49.5. It's a close spread, 3 points in favor of Green Bay at Lambeau Field. Maybe you can do the Chris Berman. I can't do it. It's just, I don't know how much of the focus is going to be on
frozen tundra.
Exactly.
Was that my Chris Berman? It was that right? It wasn't that good.
Better than mine would be. So, I mean, this one to me is the game I want to schedule time around my television to watch and just stack it up, both sides of it. If I play GPPs, just because I'm going to be a donkey in this one and go with my gut and my emotion, because that's how I enjoy playing this. I play my cash for my discipline, and I play my GPPs to have fun. And this is the game I'm going to be just nailing the hell out of for my own personal smaller GPPs. So, like, dislike, agree, disagree.
I mean, Aaron Rodgers is in the conversation for the number one quarterback on the board this week. One of the things I like about the GPP play here is you automatically see Seattle defense and you think, oh no, you're going to play against Seattle defense. And that's true. I mean, they're pretty good against opposing quarterbacks and running backs, and they're just a good defensive team. They're not a team that gets a ton of turnovers or does a ton of defensive scoring, but they tend to play these games where they limit the opponent. They kind of play some ball control. They do have that style. And they have a reputation for being a great defense, which is something I love. I love targeting teams going up against other teams that have a great reputation for defense. But, in this case, I think Aaron Rodgers and his skill outweigh, any reputation that Seattle brings back. Now, here's the thing. Aaron Rodgers is one of these guys that has started slow multiple seasons in a row. So that's my one concern. You remember RELAX and the season before that. Like there have been like almost 3 years in a row, I believe, where Rodgers plays his first 3 or 4 games of the season kind of disappointingly. Everybody's like, "What's going on with Aaron Rodgers?" And then he turns it around and becomes awesome again.
Right. Well, he comes out and he yells at the media and tells everybody to chill.
He's like, chill, take your time. And then he's awesome again, right? So will he do that again? I don't know. I mean, but taking that aside, I mean, Rodgers to Devontae Adams seems really strong. Seattle has a couple of has top-notch defender in Richard Sherman. I think he's going to be on Jordy Nelson. Now, Nelson can burn Sherman. Sherman's getting older, and he's not really locked down the way he used to be anymore anyway. But I think that's going to be kind of chalky, Rodgers to Jordy Nelson. So I like to go off chalk and look at that Rodgers to Adams combination. I'm not sure if I love Montgomery in this one, because Seattle definitely does a pretty good job against the running back position, and I haven't seen enough to know if Green Bay is going to utilize Montgomery as a pass catching running back or focus on that. I know they did that a little bit last season, but then they kind of went away from it later on. So I don't know if they're going to use him in the way I hope they do, which is certainly in a pass catching role out of the backfield, which is what the Packers have lacked for years, and as opposed to like a plotter role, which tends to slow down their offense. So I don't know about him, but I definitely like Aaron Rodgers here. I certainly like the Green Bay side across the board. Probably not going to have any Randall Cobb shares, but again, on your freak flag fly GPP, million entry thing, yeah, take a shot with Cobb, I guess. On the Seahawks side, yeah, I mean, everything's in play. They don't have a lot on offense. Like, we're not really playing Thomas Rawls here. Eddie Lacy, there'd be that revenge thing, but I don't even know if he's the starter. And I'm not sure what revenge he's going to get. He sucked it up for Green Bay. Green Bay should be looking for revenge on him for, like, fucking up their offense for as long as he was on it. Like, this was a guy who, when he was out there, was making the team worse. When he left, they got better. That actually might have been the cause of Aaron Rodgers' slow starts, just like trying to get Lacy going. Oh, I hate that guy. So I really do. I hate that guy.
Packers fans probably hate him too.
You couldn't have had a better opportunity than Eddie Lacy on the Packers, like this team that's so good offensively, that it should open everything up. And no, he was just slow and fat. The worst kind of running back for this team. So I hope that they don't use Montgomery in the same way. I hope they use him as a pass-catching sort of scat back type who can also run up the middle, but that's a 3-down kind of threat. So for Seattle, I guess it's Russell Wilson's always in play. He's an exciting player. Obviously, they have a 23.5 point total here. It's not one of the higher totals on the slate. Obviously, they're on the road. But, you can look at Wilson to Doug Baldwin as a possible, combo to play. I don't love quarterbacks on the road as underdogs. It's like one of my least favorite situations to play. I think they're inconsistent, and I think the numbers bore that out. I actually saw some statistical analyses done on this, and the least consistent situation is an underdog road quarterback. And I think it's a situation that I think a lot of people have actually looked for a road dog quarterbacks because they think like, oh, he's going to be playing catch up and they'll be throwing a lot, but that hasn't borne out to high fantasy totals as a rule. So road dog quarterbacks, it's just not a scenario I'm going to do a whole lot with. Even though I like this game, I'm probably not going to have, certainly not in cash, and maybe just the smallest squeak of GPP exposure to Wilson, to Baldwin, or maybe even Richardson, who is the number 2 wide receiver for Seattle, in case we didn't know. Definitely not touching.
You taught me something.
Yeah, there you go. Paul Richardson.
I thought it used to be Lockett and whatnot, but
Lockett
I haven't paid that much
guy.
attention to it because I don't need to yet because I'm not focused on that deep into Seattle's roster. I'm focused on Wilson and Baldwin and whatever else.
But again, Richardson being on the field, they
that.
got rid of Jermaine Kearse, and now Richardson will be on the field a lot more. And actually, he's super cheap, and like maybe a punt kind of situation. I always look for that cheap player that can get me 5 receptions. So, in a possible, 80-yard 5 reception or with some upside kind of situation. But I'm not sure Richardson is there yet. Richardson's a very tiny man. It's hard to believe he's the number 2 wide receiver for this team. So we'll see how that goes. But that's about it. I think I'm not going to be super excited about the Seahawks offense, but I definitely like everything to do with the Packers.
Sounds good to me. Next game would be Carolina-San Francisco, and this is another one where you got a lopsided road favorite again, 5.5 points. I saw it as high as 6 earlier in the week. 48 point total suggests there will be some scoring, most likely on the Carolina side, but everybody's talking about Carlos Hyde, so I know you have a pretty strong opinion on Cam Newton, so why don't you fire that one on?
I have a very strong opinion on this game. So again, remember I mentioned some of the donkey websites out there where you have the sort of masses who don't know what they're doing, putting out lineups and recommendations. One of the people I'm seeing show up all over the place, and it's shocking, is Kelvin Benjamin. Everybody loves Kelvin Benjamin. He's on every how do you like my lineup question that I see is I got Kelvin Benjamin on, and every moron fantasy football writer is recommending. Not good ones, but I'm saying like the ones out there who don't know what they're doing. They're all recommending Kelvin Benjamin. And I'm like, what the hell's going on out here? Are these people idiots? Let me kind of point something, and I assume they're doing it because they're like, oh, San Francisco sucks, and they're terrible, and they couldn't stop anybody last year, and they're gonna be. Let me explain something here about this game. Cam Newton has only started practicing. He's been on a long-term injury. He wasn't throwing at all. He's only started really throwing and practicing the last week or so. Like, he didn't have any OTAs. He was coming off of surgery. He didn't have any real preseason. He didn't have any training camp. Nothing. He's coming in. He almost wasn't going to play week 1. Like, he's in that kind of scenario. And I think he only started practicing, like I said, about a week and a half ago. This guy's coming in rusty. He hasn't been playing. Do you really want to stake your week 1 on a guy catching passes from a quarterback who's just getting off of like a massive shoulder injury, surgery, all of that, and his back. I mean, it's the same thing that's going on with Flacco, where you're not really wanting to play his pass catchers. It's his first game back, and he hasn't been practicing at all. He didn't practice at all. So, whilst again in your crazy wacky GPP scenario, sure, I'll let you go nuts with whatever. But I mean, in a real lineup, you wouldn't be using Kelvin Benjamin catching passes from Newton until we see that Newton actually, has his shit together. Newton's kind of like not a rhythmic quarterback even when he is practicing. He's sometimes off. He's often off his game. So when he hasn't been playing much, I don't want to touch him. I mean, the same thing with Christian McCaffrey. He's a rookie. I get it, and I love his skill set, but he hasn't played with Newton very much, and I just can't trust Newton to get him the ball in advantageous situations. So I do have a strong feeling about this game. My feeling is I don't want to go anywhere near the Carolina side because I just don't trust Cam coming off this massive injury. That doesn't mean that Cam won't get back to form at some point this season, but I highly, highly doubt that he's going to be, in mid-season form week 1, having not practiced at all for 6-7 months or just like a week of it. He hasn't had time to acclimate. He hasn't had time to get comfortable. I don't think he's going to be sharp week 1, and I'm not looking to get a wide receiver from a quarterback who's not sharp. So I don't really get that play at all. I'm not doing it. I do like some situations on the San Francisco side of the ball, and I love Carlos Hyde this week because I think they're going to feed him the rock nonstop in this game. That's their path to victory. 49ers have a new coach. He's an exciting coach. What's his name? Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan. Shanahan does two things well. He focuses on his running back, his workhorse, and they call it the X receiver, but he generally peppers his X receiver with tons of targets. That receiver is Pierre Garçon, and Garçon is in play this week.
Oh, yeah.
No question. He's certainly a playable guy. I don't know. I haven't actually looked up his salary. Let me see here. Of course, I shut my screen, so I gotta reopen it. But I'm gonna just look up Garçon's. I haven't used him in many lineups, which tells me he's probably just outside of that cheap enough range that I was looking for. He's probably in the mid 5s would be my guess. Let's see.
I was gonna say, where does that put him on DraftKings? Probably 5K.
Over 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there he is, 5,300. So Carolina could not stop the pass last year. They got rid of Josh Norman and the year before that, and they really haven't replaced him. And so according to the DVP numbers, this is a good matchup. According to our numbers on our sheet, WR1, they were 23rd, so a good matchup for Pierre Garçon. So I don't see why this isn't a good situation for Garçon, and I love Carlos Hyde. Carlos Hyde's a cash play for me. I think they're going to pepper him with targets. He's ridiculously underpriced. I don't understand why he's 4,600. He doesn't have competition for anything on this team, and I think the 49ers are probably going to win, even though they're underdogs by 5.5 points.
I was going to say that's where you think. I was going to ask you that if you thought the Vegas line was wrong.
I definitely think it's wrong. Let me see my.
In this particular game.
Hold on, because now I'm going to check the actual sports book rather than some of this, because I think these numbers are changing. I think these numbers are changing fast.
Starting to change.
I mean, we saw it. We saw it already with the other.
Doing that, I know you'd mentioned you didn't necessarily like Le'Veon Bell. You thought David Johnson was a better player. I think there's going to be a ton of one of those two or the other, and Carlos Hyde in a lot of lineups this week.
I would say the cash chalk play is, one of those two. I think the correct one is David Johnson and Carlos Hyde. Pairing those two up on FanDuel, pairing those two up on DraftKings, that's going to be very, very common. That's probably the chalk move that people are going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, Carolina is still favored by 5.5, so take that for what it's worth. On paper, I guess, they're supposed to score somehow.
It's interesting. Maybe they think Cam's healthy.
I mean, I think they're underestimating. They're looking at San Francisco as last year's team. They have a competent quarterback in Brian Hoyer. They have a quality head coach in Shanahan. They have a couple of players. So I think they're going to be an improved team this year. I like that bet. I'm never going to recommend a bet. That's not what I do. I don't do betting against the spread. But I kind of like taking the points in the 49ers this week. I think they could win. Yeah, I think they could win the game. That's a hot take. No, not a hot take, because I don't do betting against the spread. So take that for what it's worth.
For entertainment purposes only.
Yeah, entertainment purposes only. That's right.
Your Sunday night game is a huge division rivalry between the New York Giants and the Dallas Cowboys, obviously in Jerry's world. And with the Zeke news still being up in the air, everybody's talking, McFadden. I'm not hearing a lot of people talk about Dak. I'm not hearing a lot of people necessarily talk about Dez. Where do you see this game holding to form where New York comes in on the road, falls behind, it's 5-point favorite for Dallas, to 50-point total? There's going to be, or do you see it kind of going more along the lines of a shootout?
Yeah, you see this 50-point total, it's already 47.5. That's how the line is moving. So
we'll update.
I just want to be clear. The Giants and the Cowboys rarely play each other to high-scoring games. These are two really good defensive teams. Okay, and I don't understand why this opened at 50 points. I don't get it. I don't get the team total they had for Dallas of 27. Where is that coming from? I don't see it. Giants were one of the best defenses across the board last season against all positions. No one put up big points against them, including Dallas. And we have the numbers. Listen, I love Dez this year. I love him. But I'm not playing him this week, man. The Giants stop that dude. That's what they do. And wait, let me get this game up on my screen here, because I want to look at the stats from last year.
I'll tell you, if you look at the DVP numbers underneath New York, it is all red.
This is what I'm saying. Like, you want to play these guys? Giants. All right, let's see if Dez didn't really play against the Giants in the first game, but yeah, he did. Dez put up 1.8 points. Against the Giants the first game, and 1 point in the second game. Now, the second game, Dez was just No, you know what? He put up 1 point. They completely stopped him, right, last year. So let's look at even Zeke Elliott. Now, no one stopped Elliott last season. No one.
Right.
Except for the Giants. Because they put up 13 points in Week 14 against the Giants. This guy put up 25, 30 points a week, 40 points. Giants came to town. 12 points the first time, 12 points the second time. Now, past history is not a definitive indicator of future results. But if you look at this team last year, these two teams played each other to both low-scoring games, and they always play each other to low-scoring games. So, one of the cool things I'm going to look into this, the reason I'm talking probably more about this game than I need to, other than, fade it, don't touch it, period, is, listen, this game is part of a 2-game slate that involves, it's going to be crazy, that 2-game slate, because you have this one, and then you have Denver, you have the Chargers at Denver. Is there a third game on Monday? Because, man.
Yeah, there's 2 Monday games.
Oh, there is a second one? Okay, because I was going to say. Okay, there we go. We have Saints-Vikings. So that primetime slate, Chargers-Broncos, I mean, that's low scoring. But the first thing we can look at is we could probably fade the entire Giants-Cowboys game in that GPP and focus on the other two. If we're correct, and those players underperform as I expect them to, because Dallas and New York always play two close, low-scoring games. The Giants' defense, they're good. Like I said, they were good last year. I don't know if that carries over year to year. So, but I'm going by the assumption that they haven't changed. Nothing. The personnel is the same. They haven't lost players on defense, so they should theoretically be the same. Dallas, we don't even know if they're going to have Zeke Elliott. As much as I wanted to play initially Darren McFadden week 1, and I had this whole idea, he's going to be cheap. No. Not playing McFadden either. This is not a good matchup for anybody on either of these two teams. We avoid it, and instead we focus on Saints, Vikings, Chargers, Broncos. Now, Chargers, Broncos, well, I don't want to play a whole lot of fucking Chargers at the Broncos. So, I mean, we've narrowed down that slate quite a bit. So we can talk about that more. But in terms of this game, fade.
Well, that was at 50-point total, that was not where I was seeing you go with that. But I love being that you live in,
it's not even a New York
that
thing.
division.
This is just,
Well,
I do watch
that
the
division.
division
You
a lot.
understand. You pay attention.
I do.
You pick up on it's a low-scoring game every time.
They're
so I like
always
it.
low-scoring, or at least both games last year. And if you go back the year before, these two teams play each other. They know each other so well. They play each other well, good defensively. Eli Manning's not good on the road. So, I mean, Odell Beckham's kind of injured. There's so many reasons to fade this game. And I love that it's a shame, again, that the total's moving. But, again, that is indicative of what the sharp bettors are seeing. I'm about to put a bet on the under on this game. Again, I'm not going to because I think that jinxes it. And I don't want to jinx what I just talked about. But, quite honestly, if I hadn't talked about it so forcefully here on the pod, I probably would be putting money on the under in this game because I really don't see. I mean, yeah, of course anything can happen, but the vast majority of the time these teams play each other close, and it should not be a game where any of these players are putting up above average numbers for what they normally do. And what we're looking for in daily fantasy sports is not to get the average game out of Des. We're looking for an exceptional game. And I don't see exceptional games come from anybody here on either side.
There you have it, and there you are. So the first Monday night game, since that's the Sunday night hammer game, the first Monday night game is New Orleans into Minnesota. And this is one where I would think you might be focused, being that the next game we're going to talk about is probably going to go pretty quick. New Orleans travels into Minnesota, 48-point total, 3.5-point Minnesota favorite at home. We know that just like Ben Roethlisberger, we know New Orleans isn't typically very good on the road. So does that just really narrow that 3-game primetime or mini slate down to just kind of a lot of Vikings for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to want to use a lot of Vikings ever. But, I mean, if you imagine using Sam Bradford when Drew Brees and, Dak Prescott and Philip Rivers are on the same slate, but yeah, I am going to use a lot of Vikings. Yeah. I mean, listen, we know New Orleans. They don't play a lot of defense. It's not something they're super interested in doing. We know the Vikings. They play really good defense at home for the most part. It's
just naming Vikings weapons for me.
There's not that many Vikings weapons. So you have, all right, Delvin Cook.
Right.
Delvin Cook.
Him and Rudolph and Bradford.
Well, no, Delvin Cook brings some risk to the table. He's a rookie. Is he really the bell cow? Are they going to mix in Lats Murray and Delvin Cook here? Or is this going to be the Delvin Cook show? I don't know. I'll wait and listen and hear. But at the moment, if I'm the starting running back for the Vikings at home against New Orleans, I kind of like that scenario. I think so. So your chalky kind of plays here are Cook, obviously Stephon Diggs, and Adam Thielen, and the tight end Zach Rudolph, right? That's my
Kyle Rudolph.
Why do I always say Zach? There must have been a Zach Rudolph.
You're thinking. I think you're crossing with Zach Ertz.
That's right, Kyle Rudolph. So you have the sort of Vikings offense in play, all of them. There's no statistic that New Orleans has that they're not bad at on defense. And on the road in particular, although, and I don't think this is going to be a repeat of that road game at Tampa last season where they end up putting up like 5 points. This isn't a division game. They don't, in division games, weird shit happens. But here I expect Minnesota to move the ball. At home, veteran team. Again, I think the sneakier play is probably Adam Thielen as opposed to Stephon Diggs, but, whatevs. In a 3-game slate, you're going to have to use a lot of these guys.
Oh, sure.
I mean, you can't be too. If I'm doing 150 lines, I like to attack the 3-game slate with 150 lines. Part of having the domination station optimizer at my fingertips means I can set up 150 lineups and I can set my percentages and hit it and potentially win a GPP. I won first place in these 2 and 3 game slates multiple times last season using the domination station optimizer, and it's much harder to do it, quite honestly, on the large slate of games. So much going on, but here we can really focus in, and if we make a couple of good fades, then we get exposure across the board, and it's doable. It's winnable.
So yeah, that's something you need to break down on a VIP pod sometime, is talk a little bit more about exposures and stuff like that, because I think that on those smaller slates, I think that's key.
It's winnable. Now, to just get back to this game, so everybody's going to kind of be off New Orleans. You're like, well, the Vikings are good on defense, and, number 5 against quarterbacks, and you look at all these numbers, and they're pretty good. So, yeah, they are good, and it's not a cash play, but certainly the Saints are the Saints, and they have good players, and Michael Thomas is awesome, and Willie Snead is out, so somebody else is going to be catching, I guess Teddy Ginn or Brandon Coleman. There'll be some other player that steps up in that role. And the tight end, Vikings have been bad against tight ends, and maybe it's a Colby Fleener scenario. I'm not really sure. It's the one thing about New Orleans is it's tough to really trust a running back situation. Like, I don't know if they're going to focus on. All right, you know what? There's one thing I have to mention here. There is a revenge factor happening in this game.
I just was thinking the exact
I totally forgot about
thing.
that. So, I mean, I wasn't even thinking about that, but because I've basically written off Adrian Peterson.
That's got to be one of the revenge narratives of all revenge narratives.
I mean, this could be, you're right, this could be the greatest ever revenge narrative. I mean, Peterson was slighted by his team, and he's a great, all-time great player. So, and they slighted him, and they didn't stand behind him when, he really did nothing wrong at all. And they this is such a dick move too. Like, don't get me started. I'll start going nuts on that. So, like, this man was slighted by this team, and maybe, just maybe, New Orleans says, you know what? Let's give him some shots against his old team. Let's give him a heavy workload here. I don't think Peterson's in there to be like the man, but they might do it this one game. I don't know. I could be wrong, but you gotta think about at least Adrian Peterson against his former team. He's healthy. All reports are he looks good, and obviously this is early in the week. We're doing this on Monday. There'll be a lot more reports, and part of the reason I like doing this so early is because you're getting the raw information here. Like, this isn't tainted by reading a whole bunch of different pundits talking about this or that. So more news will come out, and again, that's why I'll do the VIP podcast much later in the week, like Friday or something like that, because I like to get as much, even Friday night, Saturday, because I like to absorb as much information, news, and all of that as I can, blurbs and tidbits. But in this case, yeah, I mean, you got to like both sides of this game. Michael Thomas, maybe some Adrian Peterson exposure there, and obviously I'm going to look in to see who we think maybe the number 3 or 4 options on the Saints offense are going to be, and certainly with the Vikings, it's Diggs, maybe Thielen, maybe Cook, maybe
Rudolph?
Yeah, Rudolph. Man, that guy. His name evades me every time.
He's going to be the bane of your existence for the year.
I'm going to always say Zach Rudolph. Like I always call Derek Carr David Carr, or David right. Derek. I still don't know which one is which.
You've written him up as David Carr a few times. It's awesome.
Every time I'm speaking about him, I say David Carr. I can't.
It's awesome.
It's just from being old school.
So I guess in the interest of professionalism, we have to cover the last game.
No, this isn't. I mean, it's a game. You got to cover it. There are some things going on here. So, all right, defensive game.
I'll put it on a tee for you. It's a lowish total at 44 points. You got the Chargers division game, of course. The Chargers going into Denver, Mile High Stadium, where Denver's a 3.5-point favorite. Question is,
look at these numbers.
Like? I mean, Denver's all red in DVP across the board too. So I'm assuming you're not really attracted to the Chargers.
I mean, I loves me some Gordon.
Would you play the Chargers with my money?
Last year Melvin Gordon had a big game against the Broncos. And the reason he had a big game, now I'm not going crazy with this, but I mean the reason he had a big game was because the Broncos are so good against the pass, you almost have to ignore it. And so what do? You throw it to the running back. So even if he doesn't, here it is. Even if he doesn't do that, I mean, like in week 8, Gordon put up a 22-point game against. They were at Denver, and he put up 22 points last year. Seems surprising, right? But that's what he did. He was not playing for the other game that these two teams played for whatever reason. I think, did Gordon get injured late in the season? I guess he must have. So, yeah, he was out for the second one. But Gordon put up a nice game against these guys. He had seven targets, 4 receptions, had 30 touches. And the reason
that was
he had
noted.
20,
was noted last year as the soft spot in the Denver defense was against the run.
I mean, not really so soft, but I mean,
not
7.
Not that it's a strike.
But that's the only way you might look in this game. And certainly, yes, in the 3-game slate, you have to play some Gordon. Like, I'm going to play him in the 3-game slate. I'm not using him in, like, the Thursday through Monday. But if we're talking about a primetime slate, yeah, Gordon's playable here. He's not a great situation. I mean, I think they're going to destroy them. The top play is Denver defense. To me, Denver defense is always the top play every single week defensively. So anytime, I always wait and listen for people not on Denver defense, which they aren't this week, and that makes me want to use them. Because they're Denver and they put up points on defense, right? But
they're also 3.5-point favorite at home in a lower scoring game, which usually starts putting the parameters on looking at defenses. So,
but Phillip Rivers turns the ball over. That's his deal. And when he's under pressure, and also this is Denver, and Denver scores points on defense. So there's a lot of reasons to like Denver defense in the big slate, and I'm sure he'll be the chalk in the small slate. In the 3-game slate, they'll be like 50%. But in the big slate, I don't think they're going to be very highly owned at all. I mean, and then the rest of the Denver offense is in play. Certainly, C.J. Anderson. They're gonna lean on the run. I don't know about Jamal Charles or how much he's going to be used. I don't know. So I'm basically assuming Charles is like a change of pace. He's not going to cut in too deep into C.J. Anderson's touches. And you remember, in past seasons, the last couple of years, Anderson has been more of a 50-50 timeshare with like Hillman or whoever else was there. And, he's still done fine. He still had some good games, right? I think he'll be more of a 70-30 timeshare this week. And I think he could put up some numbers here in this game. I think they're going to lean on him. Sanders and Demaryius Thomas are both certainly playable here. And Anderson, so, I mean, depending, again, on what slate we're talking about, I don't mind the Denver offense a little bit. I certainly like their defense, and there's not much to like on the Chargers outside of maybe in the short slate Melvin Gordon.
There we go.
Yeah, that's about it for this one. But, Denver defense, I think they're going to be sneaky this week. I think, shockingly, Denver defense, as great as they are and as many points as they put up every single week, every single year, like as consistent as they are, I think they'll go overlooked a little bit because everybody's talking about Buffalo or the Rams or all these other really good situations.
They will be talking about the Rams now at that point. Houston, totals flipped or now that.
Yeah, I mean, Houston and, all the Pittsburgh and all those good defensive situations this week.
Yep, awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, you and I are obviously a little bit rusty, but it was a hell of a lot of fun getting back together and busting up a slate with you. I always learn stuff when I talk to the geek. So that part was way cool. I do want to say this though before we let people go. Comeback Friday, like you mentioned multiple times, the VIP only podcast will drop, and for those people that are interested in accessing that VIP, we do have a couple of links for you to click up top where you can check us out for free in a free trial. You've got the podcast coupon code that you can use for 20% off. And, as always, we'd love to have more people to talk football with during the week because that's what we love to do.
Absolutely. Well, this was awesome. Definitely a nice start to the season. I'm excited for this weekend. I'm excited for this adventure we're all about to take together, this 20-week adventure that is daily fantasy football. What I promise you is that if you listen to this pod, we're going to give you genuine advice. I'm going to give you the plays that I'm on. I'm going to legitimately share my strategies as much as I can with everybody, and we go for a ride together, for better or for worse. You don't win every single week in daily fantasy. It's a roller coaster. We try to smooth it out with our cash picks and our GPPs and whatnot, but it is definitely a roller coaster. And I've certainly found that with my readers, my VIP members, our listeners, and all of that, we tend to do well together and we tend to do poorly together. So what that tells me is, A, you're listening, and B, hey, I ain't perfect either. So we'll do our best. And I'm excited for the season. I'm excited to go on this ride, and hopefully it'll be a good one.
Well, I'll tell you what, that does it for me at Chapadong on Twitter, and most likely the Football Geek at FFootballGeek on Twitter as well, and Inside the Army under the same. You are the general. I'll let you sign us off. For that, I can tell you I will talk to you tomorrow, probably in Slack, and look forward to week 1 of the NFL season, buddy.
There we go. All right. Take care, everybody. Let's make some money this week. I'll be available all week answering questions on Twitter and in our Slack group and all of that. And like I said, be back probably Friday with the VIP Geeks Picks column and podcast that goes along with it. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the DFS Army podcast. Join the DFS Army today and gain access to our private Slack chat, where you can chat with real DFS pros and coaches, as well as other DFS Army members with winning track records. Also included in your membership is access to our premium articles, DFS Army weighted projections for every sport we offer, from NFL to MMA. Weekly player picks and cheat sheets, the strategy vault of timeless concepts, and the DFS Army Domination Station, a truly state-of-the-art lineup optimizer, offering your personal projections or ours. The DFS Army membership is the best value across the industry. Join today using the coupon code podcast on dfsarmy.com to unlock 20% off your monthly subscription and get 2 free ebooks, as well as the secrets to unlocking a new level to your game.